Welcome to Reach Out Radio Broadcast Podcast and video radio audio experience and experiment here at The Voice 17104, where we talk about all issues of social justice, both at home and abroad. We were not here yesterday because I was sick. I'm still kind of sick, but I'm here anyway. You can hear that sonorous nasal quality to my voice. It really doesn't bring a lot to the show, but well, here we are anyway. And
there might be some people who will like your voice like that. Think it adds some resonance.
wow. Who are they?
Oh, they're out there too.
Okay. If you say so. Anyway, we're here once again, and we're going to have a slightly truncated version of the show today, but we got a lot to cover, and something we want to start doing a little more often is this day in history segment. And this week in history was actually the beginning of the Haitian Revolution, which was a really seminal event in the history of Western civilization and the Western world. Really, because it was the first time that there was that successful slave revolution. They overthrew and, well, slayed their overseers, their owners. And of course, the U.S. couldn't have that. They couldn't handle that. They didn't want to accept that, but they had a little choice.
We're talking the beginning of that revolution in 1791.
Yes.
Haiti was an island, Hispaniola, which is now two countries, but Hispaniola was under the control of the French. Napoleon's people. As a matter of fact, when the war started, one of the generals who fought and lost to the slaves was Napoleon's brother-in-law, a general. But one of my heroes, Toussaint Louverture, he was a slave with a special knowledge. The knowledge was of the countryside. Many slaves only knew of their plantation. He knew of the countryside because he was a coach driver. He drove his so-called master all over the island and came to know its terrain. And a peaceful man who never had anything to do with war, obviously, as a slave under French control, he became the general, the leader, the open door, interestingly, overture to liberty, to freedom for the Haitian slave. 1904, the slaves were able to proclaim victory.
1804.
1804. What did I say?
1904.
1804.
Indeed.
No, he was an old man in 1804, huh? He
Indeed.
was dead, actually, because the French tricked him into coming to France under the guise of doing some diplomacy and writing a certain agreement, and he went to France where they quickly threw him into a dungeon and saw to it that he never emerged alive. That's how treacherous the French were. They lost the war and killed the general under the guise of diplomacy.
Those sound like some sour grapes to me, and yet that is exceptionally unsurprising. There shouldn't have been any shock to that. They knew that was how the French were, how they were going to go. And, they were bitter. And they were in the midst of any number of wars in 1791. This is post-revolution. And then, of course, the British saw opportunity, as they always do when France is in turmoil, and, of course, vice versa. And you have, of course, the revolution, the American Revolution. Oh, that would have been, of course, in 76. But that gave, hope, I suppose, that one could overthrow one's colonial overseers. Of course, we became a colonial power in and of ourselves. That took a little while, though.
Well, see, here was the thing that they could have believed. They thought they could have believed is that Americans revolted against their colonial rulers, and America would support revolutions elsewhere in the world. But of course, once Americans came into power, they even opposed the people in America who fought in the American Revolution itself. As you will see, we had many little wars afterwards by those people who thought that when they fought the British that they were freed of a yoke And that yoke became the yoke that Adams, for example, himself put on.
That's also the narrative that America put forth, that we would be this supporter of revolutions everywhere, this bastion of freedom, this lighthouse on a hill.
Yeah. Okay.
This, oh, what is it? The city on a hill.
The city. That's Ronald Reagan.
Okay, that was a little later, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, he lit up America with that phrase, didn't he? You know. Yeah.
But no, but just like then as now, we had no intention of that, especially since there were still many active slave owners and slave holders in the United States, and they did not want that example of a successful slave revolution to be even rumored about amongst their slaves.
So Americans hated what happened in Haiti. Americans trying to suppress what happened in Haiti. Americans from that moment till this moment try to tamper down those freedoms, that spirit of freedom that was obviously high within the Asian population. I mean, the Haitian population at the time. And probably to this day, because we still continue to tamper down any thoughts of freedom and independence that they might have. Don't forget, it's a country we've occupied numerous times, and I say numerous times, because it's really, truly hard to tell where our occupations end and where the next one begins. We know that officially we were there in the teens. We know that officially we were there in the 30s. But at the same time, we know that recently, for example, we deposed of a leader and moved him to another country until the forces deemed that we should move him back. You want to talk about meddling?
Which always makes me smile a little when I hear our esteemed officials say we should never meddle in elections of other countries. We've done that since our inception. We've always been a meddlesome agent in other elections, and we're never going to stop.
We certainly started in 1804 in Haiti, and it continues up until this day.
Absolutely. And even in the actions that we took towards Haiti today, and that we barely even wanted to support them through the destruction of the hurricane that just destroyed their country.
That's just the opposite. What we do is exploit that. We exploit tragedies there. We exploit catastrophes there. Come on, didn't we raise a lot of money and that never got there, Bill? Didn't we raise a lot of money that just seemed to disappear? We know that money was collected by Bill Clinton and that senior Bush guy, H.W. But that money never got to Haiti. And we also know that those people who did go to Haiti, they went there under the guise of doing humanitarian aid, but what they did was to do disaster capitalism.
Oh, they wanted to do scouting for privatization. They wanted to make sure that they could take over PREPA, which was the Puerto Rican power agency and infrastructure, which was really one of the prime targets of privatization. They'd already privatized the roadways. They'd privatized a number of the other municipal services, even education, but they had their eyes on the energy system of Puerto Rico. And this last disaster finally allowed them that opportunity to take that over.
That's a good example.
And they did.
Of disaster capitalism. Yeah. Who Naomi
Wolf or Naomi Klein?
Klein. I mean, her work on disaster capitalism and her most recent work on Puerto Rico is something that everybody should take a look at. But they exploited everything that could ever happen in Haiti. When Haiti had industry, when Haiti didn't have industry, when Haiti made cement or didn't make cement, when Haiti had trees, when we cut them all down. You know, when Haiti needed protection, we sent guys there who raped them. When the situation got bad, we allowed them to have cholera. I mean, we've been very kind to Haiti. We give it all of its problems and take all of its wealth.
And this, of course, is a George Herbert Walker Bush who is revered amongst both parties now as some sort of reasonable conservative just because I don't know, he was polite about it. He was polite in the way he crushed his enemies.
Yeah.
Unlike Trump, who is in no way polite, but still acting in the same way. He just doesn't know how to do it in the acceptable way. That seems to be his biggest problem. And there are lots of other problems associated with him that we'll get to in a little bit. But I actually heard someone the other day say on a different show that they longed for the days of George W. Bush. This is a liberal. This is a liberal. It's a very liberal person I know.
Yeah, they think.
And they longed for the days of George W. Bush.
They think they're liberal. You know, they're in the most recent poll talking about liberals, and I know I'm not allowing us to move on to where we were going, but talking about liberals in the most recent poll, over 1,000-something people was polled by telephone and interviewed as to whether or not we should try to continue to be diplomatic with respect to the Russians or continue to try to be hard and put sanctions on them and might lead to a war. 58% of the American people said that we should practice diplomacy and be friends with Russia, despite the fact that many of them might have even believed that Russia meddled in our elections. Even so, they say that the proper road to take is to be diplomatic. But when they talk to Democrats, when they talk to the liberal side, 76% think that we should be hard on Russia, even if it leads to war. You know, I am so fed up with these people who call themselves liberals and look forward to war than I am with those people who call themselves neocons and are Republican and saying that we should, and more Republicans than Democrats said that we should be diplomatic with Russia. You know, this is just blowing me away in terms of my original perspective. I thought of liberals as being on this side and conservatives as being on that side. And now that's all gone. That's all gone. You know, 58% of the American people believe that we should not put sanctions on Russia, but should practice diplomacy and be friends. 76% of the liberal Democrats think that we should be harsh, put sanctions, even if it leads to war.
Well, the foolish part about sanctions is they're not effective.
They're only effective in creating enemies. They're very effective in killing children. They're very effective in damaging the regular people in a country.
And they're also very effective in creating extremism and hatred towards America.
Absolutely. And we are in the process of losing friends all over the world. You know, there are a lot of Europeans talking about Russia, for example, with respect to what's happening with Iran. They totally disagree with what our position is and who we're telling, if you don't recognize and practice our position, we will sanction you. We're telling Europe. We're telling SWIFT, the worldwide way of transferring money, 200 different countries. We're telling them that come November, that if they continue to practice and accept the banks of Iran, then we're going to sanction their travel and ability to access the United States. You know.
So this is how we deal with our problems now. We bully people. We put weight on them. We don't ever try to convince. We simply try to dominate. I suppose now is a misnomer.
Yeah.
That's been our modus operandi for quite some time.
Since 1949, at the very least. You know, we have been on this road to imperialism is the only word. To imperialistically dominating the world. We're not satisfied with just like the Western world, the European world. We're talking about the world, ladies and gentlemen, where you do it our way or take the highway. Oh, anyway, that's where we are as Americans. Go ahead. I'm sorry. We were talking about Haiti, and we're talking about America, and we're talking about where we are today, and we have to talk about what's happening today here.
Or what happened yesterday?
Well, what happened yesterday?
The slew of convictions that were brought down upon Paul Manafort, who was, of course, Trump's campaign director.
For a brief period of time. But to talk about impeachment as a result is absolutely insane. Not one of those 8 convictions out of what, 18 charges
Hmm.
had anything to do with collusion with Russia, with the campaign.
Had it not to do with receiving much larger than permissible donations, though?
Nothing in that had anything to do with the campaign. Manafort was charged with crimes that he committed independent and before the campaign. He was not charged with crimes committed during and for the campaign. The closest thing to that campaign was in the Cohen confessions that he paid money to a porn star and a playmate in order to not have them negatively affect the campaign. You know, and that Donald Trump was aware of those payments. You know, that comes closer to the campaign, but even that is not necessarily a hard, fast legal entanglement. You know what I'm saying? You know, we can go even into our more recent past with past elections here and see that there was these same kinds of issues over and over again where people were forgiven. That's an argument. It's an argument as when was the timing of it and what the president knew and didn't know, whether or not it was his money or the campaign, and whether or not it makes a difference if it's his money or the campaign's money. All these are issues to be resolved legally before anyone can talk about even making an indictment, much less talk about making someone leave office as a result for committing high crime. You know, that's a standard that the Constitution sets forth as to what should be the context in which, and it's questionable as to whether or not this standard is being met. I say this because we are bent on impeachment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a real drive in this country towards impeachment.
Well, the use of the word traitor is so prevalent and present now, and it's at every turn, and it just brings the level of the discussion to such a fevered pitch at any sort of instance of anything. Like, if he goes out and says something mean about Omarosa, and I don't like him, I don't like what he says, I feel like just it's not cool. Don't get me wrong, but it's not traitorous. It's not traitorous to try to seek diplomatic solutions with Russia. That doesn't imply treachery, and yet it's so common.
They look, it starts off with a group of people. Well, it starts off, if we talk about Russia, it starts off with Hillary losing the election. But the rest of it involves a group of people who are so hateful of Donald Trump, especially in that position, that they will do anything to get him out of power. And you cannot do that as a democracy. Just because you don't like or find hateful some person, I mean, I can think of a lot of people who should never have been president, including Andrew Jackson. You know, I wasn't crazy about George Bush. I certainly didn't like Richard Nixon. You know, Ronald Reagan didn't do me any good either.
No, I wouldn't think so.
You know, but they were president. And we take it to an extreme that we will sacrifice democracy, that we will sacrifice the Constitution, that we will sacrifice what we're supposed to be about because of our hatred for this individual who won an election by the rules. We're in trouble if that's the case. And we're in trouble if you take some nebulous charge and use it as a basis for impeachment, as is being implied if the Democrats should have majorities in the House, in particular, after this midterm. You know, if you're going to impeach a president on nebulous charges, you are setting yourself up for a very undemocratic future. You know, we went from a presidency, a three pronged institution where you had a legislature, judicial, and a president basically equal until we got to the point of an imperial presidency. You know, and within this imperial presidency is the development of this oligarchy. And believe me, when we move towards this impeachment, we are going to move more towards oligarchical rule, not democratic rule. The people will have less and less say so, and what the next person will be able to say and do and be as a president of the United States.
Yeah. And I understand the drive and the desire to impeach this president. I really do. He is a buffoon. He is a fool. He is an idiot. He is decidedly a racist. He is a classist. He is a billionaire who cares almost nothing for the people. I get why people want to do it. I understand the desire and the inclination. But I see several problems with this. First, of course, is who comes next? It's Mike Pence. It's a dude who actually knows politics and knows how to get things done. If you impeach Trump, some say that Pence would come right along with him, but I don't think that's necessarily hand in hand. I don't think you just get to wipe an entire election slate clean, which is what people really think that this is going to happen. I just doubt it. I doubt that.
Can't do that.
I doubt that's going to be the case.
You're going to what? Impeach Pence at the same time?
No, the idea that you could sue and just nullify completely the results of this election 2 years later and somehow, and I think this is honestly the goal of some Democrats, still magically get Queen Hillary into her throne. I think that's the goal.
That's the establishment war, not ours.
They are somehow still trying to hang on to
I agree. I mean, they are. You know, but they will destroy America in the process of doing this. You know, if they don't want Trump, they could beat him the next time, but they have to allow people to vote and stop doing the crooked things that they've been doing during the elections. You know, America is in trouble. It is America that's in trouble. You know, the fact that the Democrats ain't facing up to what their problems are is just a aspect of the trouble that we're in. The fact that they don't accept that they lost an election because of their base not being their base anymore doesn't seem to affect them. They don't seem to realize that their move towards being the establishment party and dependent on big money and big corps is what has destroyed the Democratic Party. They're moving away from progressive ideas is why there is no Democratic Party anymore. They're accusing Russia, you know, this thing of walk away, where people are walking away from the Democratic Party. They're accusing Russia of making people walk away from the Democratic Party instead of facing the fault there, Brutus, is in ourselves that people are walking away from us. And they expect to settle this problem or cure this problem or resolve this problem by blaming Russia instead of taking a look at what is happening inside their party and why they are losing their base and acting on that. You know, they're too ready with the excuses and never ready to act on what the realities are, because it's too easy to take big money.
And that's the thing about big money. You get the money, but the people don't necessarily follow. You stop talking to the working class. You stop talking to the blue collar, blue people, not skin color, obviously, but you know,
Avatar.
the Democrats who were in what they call the flyover states. You stop talking to them. You stop talking to the other working class Democrats. You stop talking to labor. You stop talking to that whole movement, and you lost the people behind
It's
it.
not
So
only
no
that.
wonder you lose elections.
Don't forget, they're fighting the progressives within their own party. Don't forget, I mean, and even when a person runs and they are full of progressive ideas, they pull away their support. They
It-
give their money and support to those who have the establishment narrative.
It's that whole litmus test that you talked about, I think 6 months ago, that you had to agree with certain things in order to be supported by the Democratic Party and to receive
Yes.
funding.
Yes, it's more than they are active. I mean, they are actively trying to cast out those ideas. They're actively trying to cast out even the people who win on those ideas by making them pledge to the Democratic Party and not to the ideas that they truly represent. You know, they're telling those people they will get no support if they don't take a certain pledge. These people won on their ideas, their progressive ideas, by appealing to that base that was Democratic, appealing to that base today. They're appealing to that base that says 58% of Americans do not want war with Russia. They're appealing to that base when they say diplomacy and no war. When they talk about the downfall, they would pray for of the defense industry.
Oh, I think most people everywhere don't want war. War is really something of the elites. It's something of those who would play for power. It's not something of the common man or woman. They just don't want war because it's their blood that gets cast in the field. It's not the blood of the rich. It's not that of the powerful. It's that of the normal person.
Anyway, yes. I keep moving because we don't have too much time today, huh? It's okay. Like I gotta go down a little bit, right? A little bit after 4. Brennan is here. Can we talk about Brennan?
Sure.
Brennan is the guy who was the ex-CI chief, whom Donald Trump took away his security clearance, and all these liberal Democrats, all these liberals are so up in arms. They are so supportive of Brennan and so against taking away his security that they have made of him an American hero. I want to talk about Brennan for a minute, okay? This is a guy who, as the CIA chief, was a part of the big lie,
You're going to have to be more specific.
weapons of mass destruction. The big lie that took 55,000 American lives and God knows how many Iraqi lives. This is the people, this is the man who told the president not only were the weapons of mass destruction and did not dispute him on yellow cake and on those aluminum rods, but this is the man who told the president that Iraq would be a slam dunk. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, was Iraq a slam dunk? If you say no, then John Brennan was wrong. You have heard, I'm sure, of the rendition program. Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, the rendition program is when we Americans go out and kidnap an individual in our country or others off the streets on his way home from work, talking on the phone to his wife. We kidnap him and fly him to another country where he would be tortured because we think he has certain information that we want.
And many people may be familiar with the term extraordinary rendition, and this was one of his babies too.
He was the person who managed the program. He is responsible for picking people up off the streets and having them tortured at places around the world. This is America. This is how you see yourself, America, that you pick people up off the street for torture. We had so many problems with people who were not the people they thought they were picking up. Just to start there, not even talking about how the whole thing is just terribly, terribly ethnically, morally, and otherwise wrong. But we've even picked up the wrong people, kept them from their wives and children, put them in little cages where they couldn't stretch out, where they couldn't stand up, where they had to be naked and cold and wet, and tortured those people until we realized that that's not the person who we should have picked up. I mean, well, in terms of the program. This was Brennan. This is Brennan.
And this really harkens to an idea that both these men and the American people themselves don't consider Iraqi men, women, and children as valuable as men, women, and children here.
Okay.
And it's yet again reiterated in decisions like this.
Okay, how about this? The drone assassination program. He was one of the people with the president who kept the list and advised the president on who to assassinate through drones, and they were, some of them, American citizens. We took out a man and then went back and took out his son, a teenager, along with his cousin, just for spite. This program, this drone assassination program, was managed by Brennan. Is this what we want as an American hero? Is this the kind of program that we stand before the world and say we are proud of? He was a part of the torture program. He approved of torture. And here it is. He graduates from being the CIA director to being a commentator or an expert or a pundit or whatever you want to call him on our corporate news, using his secret clearance as his card, as his badge, as his claim on a big salary. Now that clearance is taken away. We're taking away a part of his appeal. We don't like that. He should be allowed to make a lot of money off of having a secret clearance. Secrecy clearance. 66 intelligence officers signed a petition against the fact that he was taken, that his security clearance was taken. They signed a petition in support of Brennan.
Wow.
66
that should tell you something right
intelligence officers back this man as an American hero.
When 10 intelligence officers back one person, you should really have some doubts.
Yeah.
But when 66 intelligence people back an individual, you should start having some very serious doubts.
He is an American hero. Let me ask you, are those the values that you stand for? Are those the values that make you American? Rendition, extraordinary rendition, lies. Who composed the lies for Colin Powell to give to the world? Who composed those lies within the CIA under this man? Lie to the world, America? Is that the heroic values that you stand for now? Hey, I just want you to know who John Brennan is. I want you to know what John Brennan has done for America. I want you to put this man into that context because the corporate media is not giving you that context, least you forgot. or at least you did not remember. The corporate media is not reminding you of who John Brennan is, who John Brennan was, what John Brennan has done for America. And 66 intelligence officers also responsible for these policies and these programs stand up and vouch for him. And this is the rat hole that we are living in today.
Indeed. So I know we talked about a prison strike last year, and it was a big one.
Yeah.
But there's a prison strike that started on August 21st, which would have been Monday.
Yes.
No, which would have been Tuesday.
August 21st, which was Tuesday.
Which
the day before.
is nationwide and is said to be the biggest since Attica, or maybe even bigger.
Bigger than it. It will be the biggest, I guess. It's 17 states so far. It's 17 states so far. And it's interesting that they should mention Attica, because Attica happened on the 9th of September. And that's when this strike is scheduled to end, in recognizing the Attica uprising.
It's an interesting strategy to already plan the end of the strike before you even start it. I would have always thought that the threat of a strike was to keep it going perpetually.
The intention, and this is obvious, the intention is to call attention. And I'm going to say something here that already the strategy is a failure, because I haven't seen it on the corporate news or read much about it except buried in a newspaper. You know,
and on progressive news outlets, which is unsurprising, but you have to seek that out. You have to be going to that place in the first place.
I say again, the beginning of fake news is omission. What is fake news is how you describe your news day. If you say important events didn't happen by ignoring them, what you are presenting as the news is fake. It is not the news of the day. It is important that 17 states, that prisoners in 17 states are striking, are sitting in, are hunger striking against slavery. Listen to that.
It's no exaggeration
Against
when you say
slavery,
because it was in the 14th Amendment,
13th Amendment,
13th Amendment that abolished slavery except for conditions of imprisonment.
It says
and
unless
law breaking.
Right. Yes. And it says convicted of a crime. It doesn't say even how severe or whatever that crime has to be. If you are convicted of a crime, they're allowed to hold you in servitude according to the 13th Amendment, and it is effective. It is effective. Listen, you ever heard of a corporation called Unicor? UNICOR? Look it up. It is an industrial corporation owned by the United States government. The United States government employs prisoners at 25 cents an hour.
Mm-hmm.
For example, to make all of the military helmets that our military wears, all of the military targets that they learn to shoot on, even doing things like data processing. You know, we have talked before about Victoria's Secret and Starbucks and how they use 25 cents an hour to sew up bras and put labels on things. You know, the big corporations enslave these prisoners, but we're also talking about the United States government itself enslaving prisoners to make all of our war helmets, for example.
That's quite something. But also something is that the state of California is using prisoners and child prisoners to fight fires.
2,000 of them.
They are using them to put their lives on the line for 50 cents a day, maybe, to fight fires.
It's up to $1.
Okay. Maybe it's worth it then.
You know, you know, uh, I don't know. This strike starts on the 21st. You know why? Because that was the day that George Jackson was assassinated.
Mhm.
You know, those of you who need to remember, George Jackson was a Black Panther who was imprisoned. Wrote a very interesting book that's still interesting today. Soledad Brother, Soledad Brother, I think is
Okay.
the name of it. And he talks about the conditions of that are being suffered at that time. And on the 21st of August, that would be 1971. He was slain. They say in the process of trying to escape. Dig this. They say that his lawyer came to prison and to visit him and gave him a gun, which he hid under a wig. Now, why they didn't know he was wearing a wig beats the heck out of me. If he goes into a interview room with no wig and comes out with a wig, with a gun hidden in a wig,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where the escape attempt starts, and he ends up in the prison yard, and several people are killed, and he's one of them. You know, you can read in the New York Times today a very detailed description of what's supposed to be the chronology of this event.
It doesn't sound right, though.
And in the process, that's what I was going to say. You will have to say to yourself, "What? What? Come on!" You know. But it was on that day that George Jackson was killed, and that's why the 21st was chosen to begin this strike. And on the 9th of September is when Attica broke loose in its uprising. And that's when they decided that they would end this strike. And the thought of this strike, you will recall, started in April because of the uprising, or not uprising, riot, or not riot, but instigated thing in Lee County, where's that, South Carolina. The 7 prisoners were killed as the guards allowed. You know what? One of the things that happened there, you know, the guards moved certain lockers of individuals to another part of the prison where they had to go into this rival part of the prison to get their stuff. And that's where the fight ensued. In other words, if that's the case, it was set up. But let me say this, that one of the issues on this strike, the purpose of this strike, they said, is to make a declaration of humanity. To make a declaration of humanity, a declaration that those in prison are human. Just that simple idea. They want to get that simple idea across to Americans.
Here are some of their very reasonable demands: immediate improvements to the conditions of prisons, an end to life without parole sentencing, an end to racial overcharging and oversentencing, voting rights for all imprisoned and formerly imprisoned individuals, the reinstatement of Pell Grants, and incarcerated people should be paid the prevailing wage for their labor. As we were just talking about, $1 a day. $1 a day.
25 cents an hour.
That's slave wages.
For making helmets for
That's
the United States government.
It's slave wages.
25 cents an hour. And then you know what? They charge you to be in prison. They take that money before you leave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to pay for your own imprisonment these days. They find ways to take your money, not just to pay $1, you know, whatever it is for a phone call a minute, you know, but they take your money for your imprisonment. They charge you for feeding you. They charge you for bedding you, you know.
But something what you just said was very important. The humanizing of prisoners, to make them seem and to be human, to treat them like people, to not treat them like chattel, or to not treat them like slaves, to treat them like actual people with actual rights, because they are, and they do.
Now here's a issue that is issues that somehow or another doesn't get picked up. They are against gang enhancement policies. Gang enhancement policies. What are gang enhancement policies? This is a policy where they categorize you as you come into a prison situation. You should be with the black prisoners. You should be with the white prisoners. You should be with the Nazi prisoners. You should be with this zip code prisoner or this color, gang color prisoner. In other words, they isolate people in prison according to the gangs that they perceive, not integrate people totally within the prison system. Integration leads to people getting along.
That sounds very much like what is done with housing in the United States.
They do this deliberately. This goes back to divide and conquer and all those other kinds of ways of doing things. But as long as you separate people, say by gangs or by color or whatever, as long as you keep people separate, there's a them and an us. Mm-hmm. There is the enhanced possibility of conflict. And this is something that the prison guards, the prison system, the prison so-called managers manage, is to enhance this conflict, is to keep these people fighting against each other as a means of control and as a means of them keeping control. For example, they don't want prisoners getting along. If prisoners get along as they did, for example, at Attica, and make demands that they all agree to, we have a problem.
No, it's a really smart tactic, the divide and conquer tactic. It works. Why else will they do it?
They do it. And the prisoners themselves are asking that this be stopped. They're asking to be integrated, white, black, and otherwise. Integration, you talk to the guy next to you. While you're working, while you're in your cell, or while you're in the rec room or wherever. Help each other. This is the process of peace. The process of non-peace is separation and building up mythologies of hatred against them and mythologies of goodness about the us. And this has been proven historically over and over and over again that it is very well known. So it is used. And the prisoners are striking against it. No more gang enhancement policies in our prisons, they say.
Well, that would be nice. And I don't know. I'll just assume that we stand behind these strikers, and we just hope to get that word out more. And unfortunately, it's not being covered. Unsurprisingly, it's not being covered. And here we are.
And this is where we are today. Recognize that. And we are, as a fourth estate, only covering those things that fit within a certain narrative that keeps a certain position of people within our country static. You know, will we keep the conditions that are within our country the same tomorrow as they are today? Well, we don't look to improve things, but maybe to even allow for more conflict because it allows for more control. And we're talking about that in prison, and we're talking about that out of prison. You know, one of the things I wanted to talk about briefly today, and it has to be brief, is this: the color of law.
And it coincides with our next topic, ideally. And this was, of course, HUD's delaying of the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule for 3 more years, and then eliminating the assessment tool that actually assessed it. And we're talking about redlining. We're very definitively talking about redlining here, and the intentional government planning of low-income neighborhoods to be racially segregated and to be lower funded, both in terms of education, in terms of police, in terms of fire, and in terms of even funneling or directing, say, the crack epidemic to certain areas or regions or cultures.
And you see that's happening today.
It's still happening.
And it's
It's
delayed for 3 years.
they're seeking to even make it worse. They're seeking to continue the current pattern, the current momentum.
The perfect time to introduce you to a book called The Color of Law. The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. A forgotten history of how our government segregated America. In other words, he is telling us, and please, 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 look at this for yourself and read the documentary evidence that this man puts forth. He is not making a case that is nebulous. He is making a case that is solid about our intentions over these years. I will read something here very quickly from the preface, where he says that we tend to think of segregation as de facto, that it's caused because individuals make decisions to live here or not to live here, or not to sell this house or to move over there, or individual move into a place and other individuals decide to leave. And all these things lead to de facto segregation. It comes as just as a result of that. He is telling us that no, sir, the segregation in our country is de jure. It is segregation by law, not just because it happens. It says, all those things might have something to do with the truth, but it remains a small part of the truth, submerged by a far more important one until the last quarter of the 20th century. Racially explicit policies, and you can continue that into this century as you just showed, racially explicit policies of federal, state, and local governments define where whites and African Americans should live. Today, residential segregation in North, South, Midwest, and West is not the unintended consequences of individual choices and of otherwise well-meaning law or regulations, but the unhidden public policy that explicitly segregated every metropolitan area in the United States.
That's a big statement.
He backs it up. The policy was so systematic and forceful that its effects endure, as you just showed us, to the present time. That's a part of the preface. And he goes on from the beginning of this last century until today, to the end of the last century, and shows us the laws, shows us the written documentary law and its effect on our society. And he shows us the intentionality of those people who made those laws to make America and keep America a racially segregated and racially prejudiced nation. It is no accident that we are where we are today. Racism in America is not de facto. Racism in America is caused by the decisions of its leaders to make racism a fact of American life. Read The Color of Law, and I'm going to talk about this as I continue my reading over the next couple of weeks. I am going to talk about this and present to you some of the documents, etc., if you don't take time to read it yourself. I want you to be familiar with what we did in this country and the laws we passed in this country that make us what we are today. We are not just a racial country because we're stupid. We're not just a racially prejudiced country because we're ignorant.
Well, I look forward to getting into that. And there have been any number of studies that have proven that correct. That have proven that despite the directives towards integration that HUD came up with, it was back in the 50s even, that has not happened, that municipalities have just taken it upon themselves, and every level of government has taken it upon themselves to maintain that segregation. And so in 2010, the Obama administration tried to put this, I believe, what's it called? The affirmatively furthering fair housing rule into place. And now Ben Carson, however you want to talk about him, I'll let you do it because I never quite feel comfortable doing so.
Him and Clarence Thomas.
Uh-huh.
Two of my favorite people.
Colin Powell.
Colin Powell.
A little less so.
Well, yeah, but see, my first problem with him is like killing people.
Yeah.
You know,
He does like killing people.
Yeah.
But trying to maintain that sort of segregation.
Sort of. Ain't no sort of about it.
Nope.
Yeah. It's strictly.
Mm-hmm.
This is strictly, even though we try to blame Russia for causing racism in America, Russia had nothing to do with this. All these laws and whatnot that Richard Rothstein talks about are ours exclusively. American decisions in America. And Russians or Iranians, now we're saying the Iranians, are meddling here. Facebook took down some 600 pages because they had something favorable to say about Iran. And he said they had to be, like Iranian bots, simply because they said something that was not within the narrative but that we have about Iran. It's coming to the point where the only things that we will be able to read on Facebook or in our newspapers, etc., are those things that fit the narrow narrative that is put out that we should walk this straight path. And the more and more that we Americans don't learn to read and learn for ourselves, the less and less informed that we are going to be. So pretty much you have that. Richard Rothstein gives us a very good, chronologically important documentary documents galore, laws, where they are, etc., as to what America has been about. And this is the real story.
Yeah. So let's briefly talk about that 11-year-old who kneeled during the pledge, who was reprimanded.
Yes, sir.
Is that video you got?
That's that video. That video has to do with the policy and of what happened and how we reacted to it. It has nothing to do with the 11-year-old girl. I said that because I want people to hear what this sports commentator has to say about athletes kneeling. But first, this 11-year-old girl, who, interestingly enough, she's being defended by Hillary Clinton, or people who somehow or another step back into this picture. Hillary said to her in a tweet, "It takes courage to exercise your right to protest injustice, especially when you're 11 years old. Keep up the good work, Mariana." That's Hillary. This young lady, Mariana Taylor, 11 years old, was inspired because of what Colin Kaepernick had done. And she wanted to make a statement about sexism and racism in America. And during the time in her class when they were supposed to pledge to the allegiance, she took a knee. In doing that, she was reprimanded by her teacher and basically sent from the classroom in tears.
Wow.
There was nothing said to her about the importance of standing for your convictions, of having moral fortitude, of standing for something in this world. Nothing like that was said to her. She was reprimanded for expressing an opinion against racism and sexism. The school board is now denying that she was reprimanded, but it took another teacher later in the day to find out what was wrong with this young lady and stop her from crying by encouraging her to be a person of conviction. There was finally in that school a teacher who understood, and there's so many Americans who don't understand conceptually of what it means to be an American or what it means to take a knee, and who are dissuaded from these kinds of convictions by the statements of our president, this is what Dale Hansen, a sports commentator, spoke out about in a very short, concise, but I think potent and direct message to America on these NFL protests. And I'd like, yes, for us to hear that.
Former 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick takes a knee during the national anthem in San Francisco last year. We noticed, but very few players joined him. Not many players seem to care. He can't get a job in the NFL now, and very few have said much about that either. But the president says he wants that peaceful protest to stop, says those players should be fired if they take a knee during the anthem, and calls those players a name I never thought I'd live long enough to hear a president say, and now everybody cares. Donald Trump has said he supports a peaceful protest because it's an American's right, but not this protest, and there's the problem. Any protest you don't agree with is a protest that should be stopped. Martin Luther King should have marched across a different bridge. Young black Americans should have gone to a different college and found a different lunch counter. And college kids in the 60s had no right to protest an immoral war. I served in the military during the Vietnam War, and my foot hurt too. But I've served anyway. My best friend in high school was killed in Vietnam, and Carol Meyer will be 18 years old forever, and he did not die so that you could decide who is a patriot and who loves America more. The young black athletes are not disrespecting America or the military by taking a knee during the anthem. They are respecting the best thing about America. It's a dog whistle to the racist among us to say otherwise. They and all of us should protest how black Americans are treated in this country. And if you don't think white privilege is a fact, you don't understand America. The comedian Chris Rock says it best. There's not a white man in America who would trade places with him, and he's rich. It has not gone unnoticed that Trump has spoken out against the Mexicans who want to come to America for a better life, against the Muslims, and now against the black athlete. But he says nothing for days about the white man who marched under a Nazi flag in Charlottesville, except to remind us there were good people there. And when he finally tried to say the right thing, not one of them was called an SOB or should be fired. We have white men in America who wave the Nazi flag and the Confederate flag, and he's concerned about taking a knee because it disrespects this flag. We use that flag to sell mattresses and beer. We wear it as a swimsuit. We wrap our bald heads in a flag bandana and stick it in our pants because we disrespect that flag every day. Maybe we all need to read the Constitution again. There has never been a better use of pen to paper. Our forefathers made freedom of speech the First Amendment. They listed 10, and not one of them says you have to stand during the anthem. And I think those men respected the country they fought for and founded a great deal more than the self-proclaimed patriots who are simply hypocrites because they want to deny the basic freedom of this great country, a country they supposedly value and cherish so much.
Isn't that cogent?
Oh, that's right on.
That's right there, isn't it? I mean, like, listen to that again and again, and just like address. It's a short, knowable, hearable, concise, but insightful commentary about America and about American values,
Or what they should
what
be.
they should be. What they should be. I'm going to have to go down and meet with the food bank.
Okay. So, this is a short one today.
Yeah,
Mostly my fault. My bad.
we got a lot of stuff still to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. And some of it I really hope that we get to. Cause I still like to talk about this 87-year-old dementia woman who was tasered by police. Because there's something wrong with our policing here in America.
Oh, absolutely right.
And some other things. John Bolton made a statement about how we used to have the capacity to overthrow governments, and he wished that we still had it.
We still do.
Well, we're not successful. We're in Afghanistan for 17 years trying to do something, and it hasn't gotten done. We went to Iraq, and it hasn't gotten done. We went to Syria, and it hasn't gotten done. You understand? We went to Venezuela, and we had one, and then they came back and overdid it. You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
gee, I'm sorry.
You know, so I mean, our efforts at regime change are failing these days, and Bolton is lamenting that.
Indeed. So, thank you for listening and to watching this edition of a Thursday Reach Out Social Justice broadcast. For Bill Jameson, my name is Justin Geist. This has been Reach Out.
Okie dokie.